Okay, so good afternoon from Ireland. My name is Hajar Al-Kaddo. So welcome to our really interesting discussion and session today. We'll be talking about what the pandemic means to us, how we are going to look past the pandemic, and the youth and growth of our communities of faith, or the youth, as growth and challenges in faith. During the last couple of months. We all know, so firstly, I'd like to welcome you obviously on behalf of the organisers. So the National Forum of Cooperation of Religions in Finland, CORE, Dublin City Interfaith Forum, so DCIF, the Anglican Church of Finland, and the Lutheran Church in Finland Youth Advocacy Group, NAVI. It's a wonderful set of people on organizations and umbrella organizations that are interfaith in Finland and Ireland. So I'd like to welcome you on behalf of them, and I'd like to welcome our panelists, who are three wonderful young people who are going to share their experiences with us today. We're obviously in a time of, COVID-19, a pandemic that nobody foresaw, unless you're reading very closely, which I know many of us weren't. A time of, immense suffering and immense loss of human life. We've hit, more than 1 million people, 33.7 million have had this, contagious, detrimental disease, and yet we're all still here. And thankfully, but what we want to do today, and we plan to do, is discuss together in this platform, the challenges and experiences of young people from Ireland and Finland, from their youth and interfaith perspectives, and to understand these perspectives, because together we learn, together we grow, together we become stronger. So I'm not going to do any of the talking today, hopefully. We have these wonderful 4 panelists who will basically answer 2 broad questions. Has COVID-19 affected your studies or your perceptions of the future, or your view as a young person of faith? A second part is we want to know is, what kind of experiences have you had of as interfaith groups, and what kind of positive outputs and outcomes have you seen? So without further ado, Finland, Salma Heib, who is a Muslim representative, and Roni, Vatto, our Lutheran representative, and from Ireland we have Daniel Canning, who is our Buddhist youth. I'm going to welcome each of our panelists one by one, and we'll hear their experiences for a couple of minutes, and then we will go on to a discussion between all of us. And so Salma, hopefully, will be our first panelist today, who's from Espoo, Finland. Hopefully I said that correctly. She sits on the town's youth council. She is a young Muslim woman of faith. She loves to play video games, which is always wonderful, especially during these times. And obviously, she's a social person who, understands and likes to reflect on different topics, from belief all the way to TV shows. So we have our really interesting, diverse young person here who is going to share their experiences with us. So over to you, Salma.
So hi everyone, I'm Salma, and I'm very happy to meet you. So I'm going to talk about how I felt for the first time when I heard about COVID and when it affected us here in Finland. So at first, no one really believed in COVID, like it's just a flu. Everyone thought about that. So I also thought about that. But then the whole country went into a lockdown, and we had online school, and I as a student felt really depressed because I didn't like the online school, and I just didn't know what to do with my life because I didn't learn anything, and I was having my finals, so everything was so dark and black in my eyes. But thankfully, because of my faith, I felt like there is going to be a light in the end. So I wanted to talk about something a bit heavier, and that's racism. And I felt like in Finland, at first, it was the East Asian people that faced racism because of the COVID, because it came from China and blah, blah, blah. But then the city of Helsinki, it's like the neighbor city, the capital of Finland, there was reported that there was a big increase of cases among Somali people, and Somali people are usually Muslim, and that's like the stereotype. So I started to notice that people started to avoid me because I am a Muslim, and yeah, I felt really hurt because I didn't do anything, but everyone wants to be safe, and I cannot blame people for that. But I mean, it isn't my fault at the end of the day. But now it's better, and I'm back in school, and I see people, and I wear a mask. So not many people avoid me anymore, but I still remember it. Yeah, a bit heavy start, but let's continue.
And thank you for kind of contextualizing the issue a little bit more, that, you know, obviously there's a lot of challenges and biases and perceptions of this actual COVID-19 situation, and there's a lot of phobias, I think, reoccurring, and definitely that's a really interesting point that you definitely bring up, so hopefully we can kind of expand on that. I think another, just to move on to our next panelist, who is Daniel, and he's currently working as manager in the Dublin Buddhist Centre, and he's pursuing a master's in intercultural theology and interreligious studies at Trinity College Dublin. So Daniel converted to Buddhism in 2014, and is training for ordination into the Buddhist order. I'm not even going to try and pronounce which order, so I apologize. Yeah, and outside his studies, he enjoys, you know, reading, socializing, music, swimming, and writing. And what's really interesting is to see that actually, as young people, we all share very, very similar social, you know, hobbies, and this is probably really detrimental on you as well, Daniel, as somebody who is a manager in this centre and who is, you know, obviously studying a master's degree. We'd love to hear your insights.
Thanks very much, Hajar, and a big welcome to everybody who's in the audience listening and watching today. Yeah, well, it has been. I mean, it's quite funny. I was living in the UK for a lot of last year, and I just moved back to Ireland in January of this year to take on the role of manager of the Buddhist Centre. So I took over on the 13th of March, the 13th of January. On 28th of March, we closed the centre because the country went into lockdown. So it was a very kind of, it really was a baptism through fire from taking on the new job. And it required quite a lot of a kind of creative response of how we could put everything we've been doing in person at the centre. And a lot of faith communities have a similar experience with this. How can we operate while in lockdown? So a lot of my job became less about taking over from the old manager and instead looking at new ways of how we could basically set up a new centre, but online. So it's been such an interesting period in doing that. Well, and also, like you said, I just started a master's this week, and it's all online so far. I'm doing it part-time because I couldn't do both full-time. And I'm actually, in some ways, I feel quite lucky I'm doing it part-time, because if I was just doing it for 1 year, I'd probably lose out on quite a lot of the student atmosphere and so on campus that I would miss. So hopefully by 2022, things will be a little bit more settled down. And college will resume like it normally has. But I mean, personally, it's been quite, it's been challenging but inspiring as well. It's interesting, like particularly, you know, the team I joined at the centre have all been doing their jobs here for quite a long time, and they're all very, very experienced Buddhists. And it was really interesting watching how they developed into, how they basically took advantage of the situation with COVID. And I learned so much from them. So I was very lucky to come along with that kind of, I was kind of like a blank canvas, and they could kind of inspire me in different ways, how I could make my faith work while also being strongly challenged with this new COVID-19, as well as trying to run a centre. But one of the key teachings in Buddhism is impermanence. And, you know, now more than ever, COVID really shows us that, you know, life is very uncertain. You know, nobody a year ago would have imagined that we'd be here a year later. So in a way, it almost just kind of reconfirmed the fact that this always, you know, there's always something going on in our lives, whether it's, you COVID or something else. Our lives are always out of our control in different ways. So in a way, we kind of just have to work with what we've got. And that was kind of a big challenge of this year, was looking at, well, how do I work with that in some ways? So maybe I'll leave it there next and talk a little bit about that more later on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was a really insightful kind of beginning to our discussion as well. I think, adding on from the phobias and the tensions around, COVID to the transformative situations and how best we can manage them is obviously really essential, actually, to our growth, as you said. And making faith work in these times, that's exactly what hopefully the message of our discussion today is as well. Our third and lovely panelist is also from Finland, Roni. He is currently residing in Helsinki, but he is originally from a town called Kouvola. He graduated with a bachelor's of social services and he's a church youth leader in the spring of 2019, and now he's studying a bachelor's of theology in the University of Helsinki, which is wonderful. The Lutheran Church of Finland has been a big part of his life over the past 10 years. And he spent most of his free time in his youth in different activities organized by the church. Again, another reader, gamer, really enjoys to work with different organizations. And this is what we like to see, is our variety and the span and of skills and abilities and interests of our young people. And that's why today's conversation is just as important with these young people. So Roni, please take the floor. Excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much, and also on my behalf, welcome to everybody who's watching and listening to this. In Finland, the Evangelical Lutheran Church is the biggest religious organization here, and I have been, like Hajar said, I have been in its different activities for like more actively for the past 10 years, but also before that. And it has been a really weird time, because going to some sort of event it has been a big part of my life, and being in the same room with other people, and if it's like Sunday service or something, being in the room and praying and doing stuff with other people, and suddenly it's all taken away. It was really weird experience, and I also work volunteer is a better word, volunteer in other organizations, and all of those gone. So my schedule, I remember when looking at my calendar, it was start of COVID-19 situation in Finland. It was around March, I think, and I had just set up my calendar correctly and looked like, okay, there's like maybe 3 weekends completely off before summer, and then suddenly nothing but time in my calendar, which was really weird. And at first it was kind of okay, like it's always nice to have a breath between things and just calm down. But I started to notice that it does affect me, it does affect to everything that I do, because you can see my apartment here. This is 25 square meters. It was really, the walls at some point started to close in because it's so small. But I think the biggest thing was that I noticed that my idea of future was a bit changing. Like I wasn't thinking about the things that I have to do tomorrow or a day after that. It was like more long time, and like my perception of like future was widened considerably. And I noticed that some things in my faith, like things that had been like in a smaller role, came bigger. Yeah, and there's this idea in what is taught normally at confirmation camps here in Finland, that Christian faith is like this stool that has 4 legs, and those 4 legs support your faith. One leg is reading the Bible. Second leg is prayer. Then there is Holy Communion with other Christians, and the final one is connection with other Christians. So of these 4, I lost one because I didn't have a physical connection with other people. I attended to like these Zoom services, but it wasn't like the same thing. But it brought up some new things while taking away some other things.
I think what I'd like to ask each of you, because we're now going to throw ourselves into a discussion. Some of you have touched on some really interesting key lessons learned. Is there anything that really you'd like to share in terms of one extra lesson you've learned, maybe about yourself, maybe about your faith group?
I feel the pandemic and the self-isolation that we have been practicing has been underlining the connection to other people, like, and I mean physical connection. There is something in that connection that's happening face to face that is lost through camera.
Yeah, and so the blessing of the physical contact with people, and as you said quite rightly, one of the legs of the stool from your teachings, and I think that that's a really important and interesting lesson. No, thank you for sharing. That's wonderful.
Maybe the biggest lesson I learned was that live your life to the fullest, or like live every day like it is your last day. Because I used to complain about waking up early for the school, but I wish I'd wake up early and go to school and see the annoying teachers and annoying students and annoying books. And I really started to appreciate the things I had. I mean, I still have them, but you know, during that time, I didn't have those things. And it felt like luxury to me to go back to school, even though it was completely different.
To be honest, and without being cliche, one of the particular lessons that I learned over COVID, and particularly in relation to my own practice as a Buddhist, was actually the importance of friendship with people of my own age. In my own personal faith community in Dublin, in the UK it's much more different, but in Dublin particularly, there aren't that many young people practicing Buddhism with us. I think I came along to this centre where I now work when I was 19. I'm now 24, so I've been around for quite a while, but for 5 years, and the age profile is still quite high. You still got people pretty much in their kind of late 30s, 40s, 50s and upwards. So there's very few young people for me to engage with over lockdown in Dublin. I live with 4 other Buddhists, one of who I work with, and they're kind of a bit older than me as well. So in terms of having connection with people of faith, that was fine because I'm surrounded by them in my job and where I live. But in terms of actually young people to talk to, I didn't have very much of that, except for I had my friends from uni and my old work colleagues, but they weren't people of faith. They were just young people. So they were kind of missing a certain element.
That actually leads me to my next question. And so tell me what each of you think the role of young people of faith is right now during this pandemic. What is our role? Is our role to set up these kind of webinars and then what?
I think that as the young people of faith, our job and kind of the responsibility is to become the next old people of the faith who know more. That I'm pretty sure something like this will happen in the future, and we would know what to do, because here in Finland, I felt really frustrated because I wanted to help people, but what could I do? I'm just 16-year-old. Oops, I didn't know I was supposed to mention my age, but okay. Yeah, I want to do something, but I didn't know how because, I'm still a child. I cannot do anything. I used to believe that, but, I'm a part of the youth council here in Espoo. It's, like a parliament or thingy. And here we did a lot of seminars, panels, this type of stuff. And I felt like people listened to us and they wanted to hear what are we thinking about. And I felt like if they want to listen to us, why wouldn't anybody else listen to us? Yeah. We are going to be the next old people, and we're going to live here for longer than the old people. You know what I mean? Like in the future, there will be more of us young people than the old people. So like we need to create the future. And that's why I think we need to learn everything we can from this. And when the next time happens, hopefully not inshallah, but we need to know what to do.
I definitely think in some ways I've probably handled the situation a little bit better than some of my other friends who didn't have the supports of faith and teachings and so on that I have. And actually, a lot of them have expressed interest in exploring faith because they saw how I was able to deal with COVID. Now I had my own struggles as well. I won't pretend I went through it all smoothly, but there definitely was a noticeable difference in my friends in how I dealt with the pandemic and in terms of how they dealt with it. And that was quite key as well, I think. So that's kind of the main thing I'd say is that you might not think it, but even by just practicing in our communities as young people, we are being pioneers in a sense because we are showing that there is a way of life as a young person in the 21st century, practicing a faith and tradition in our respective countries.
That's an excellent question, and Salma and Daniel have brought up excellent points. I think the Daniel's point of like us being representatives is actually a really important part of this, because I don't know how it's in Ireland, but here in Finland, there always seems to be like this idea that religion is somewhere deep under the surface or non-existent, and we just have to learn about the religions on like this general level, and then when you actually get a chance to talk about your faith, it feels really weird, because you think that none of these other people believe in anything because it's not shown. So it's not shown. And I think this pandemic and these kind of webinars are created that to bring out the fact that having faith in any religious system is not weird or different, but it's a normal part of anyone's life. And especially in the young people, because there's this general idea that young people, general picture of young people as this not believing in anything, just going from day to day. And that picture is wrong, basically. I mean, there can be such people, but there are also people like us who believe in something and want to bring that out in their lives in their own specific way. And yeah, and also what Salma said about the was it youth council you called it? Yeah, it was excellent point, because my background organization where I'm here, wait, I have to see the English name. This is the first time I had the English name. It's quite long. Evangelical Lutheran Church in Finland's Youth Advocacy Group, NAVI. I will call it NAVI. Our like main job is to bring out the voice of youth and young adults in church, and say like, we are here, we belong to this church as much as the older generations, because in our church the situation often is that older people make decisions and forget that there are young people who opinions should be asked about certain issues. Like they make the budgets, but for example, for youth work, and maybe ask the person who works there, the youth leader, some things, but they don't hear the voice of the youth in that decision. And our job is to bring out the voice of the youth into the decision making. So I think this pandemic is great in that sense, because we have more ways to bring out the voice, because it's easy to be silent in a room where there's a lot of people. But if there is different ways to bring out your voice, it might be easier to say that, hey, I'm here, I have opinion.
I mean, we heard that being in person and being physically present in each other's company is more fruitful. But have we seen the fruits of this online, time of the pandemic?
I mean, there are loads of benefits of being online, and I feel quite grateful for having stuff like Zoom. Like I said, our whole centre went online, and without that, we couldn't have operated at all. But I do think, or I do notice that after a full day of being on Zoom, which I often have quite a lot, my mind is definitely a lot more duller or not as sharp as it would be.
This really leads into mental health issues. And I think Roni made a really good point of this as well at the beginning, that we're stuck between four walls, basically. What do you think that we can do as youth, young people of faith, to help combat such issues?
Again, one of the benefits of having a faith practice is that we're forced to be reflective and insightful in all our day-to-day lives. So people without that, who don't practice a faith and suffer with mental health, that's a huge issue, because they don't have reflective, they don't have meditation, they don't have prayer, or any sort of these kind of self-assurances that a lot of us who do practice would have. I mean, a huge thing with Buddhism is meditation. And it's very introspective. And one of the things that I found particularly helpful about that was that, I meditate every day, and I definitely know it was a huge improvement in my mental health and in my general attitude to life, having that kind of support, particularly in terms of using a method of faith to kind of improve my mood, doing that, whether it was online in a Zoom context or doing it with my housemates, it definitely really, really helped improve my kind of my outlook, as it were, whenever I did feel quite down. Now,
and what really affected me was also that many people died during these times. And one verse in the Quran, كل نفس ذائقة الموت, it means like every soul shall taste death. And I realized that, I'm not immortal. I'm going to die one day. This could be the reason I die, or maybe like I die because of something. I can never know. And I just became even more grateful and started to, live like every day is my last day. I used to be the lazy kid who would, stay in bed and read, play games. But now, like, I want to do more. I want to explore. I want to do with my life something.
Roni, talk to me about, what you think. Is there any faith-inspired books, scripture quotes, tools that, or practices that helped you during this time?
I mean, church has been always a place of prayer for me. It's easy, for example, in Sunday service to direct your ideas to God. But because that has not been a possibility, I have, like I said earlier, I have attended a few online services, but those weren't the same thing for me. But one of the verses in Bible, this is from Apostle Paul. He says that God is not far from any one of us. In He we live, we move, and we are, which I think puts my mind to ease, because I don't need the physical place to be in touch with God. It's enough that I'm here and I know that He is here also with me.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, I know for myself, for example, during Ramadan, it was very, very difficult for me personally not to be in the middle of the mosque. But what you're reiterating is God is everywhere, God is anywhere, God is within us. And that is probably the take-home lesson. No, we're in Ireland and Finland across the world right now. And my question is to our Irish youth and to our Finnish youth is how can we come together and what can we do together to create better, stronger, resilient communities during this time?
Well, I think one of the big things we can do is to not stop, because usually when we have a good thing going, there's a point where it just like slowly dies out. And I think this outmarch of young people of faith shouldn't be stopped, because we all said good things about like why it's important that young people of faith are being vocal about their faith. And I think the best thing we can do is to keep bringing up the fact that there are young people with faith, be it whatever faith there is.
Well, I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet is we can talk to each other about the issues we have and the goals we share, but also actually just practicing together.
Yeah.
Now that might take a bit of work in terms of how different people practice, but I think it sends one message that, you know, we meet up and we talk about certain issues, but then when we actually practice together, like we all pray together, or we all meditate together, or we all, you know, look at particular texts from the Quran or from the Bible or so on, I think that in itself even sends an extra powerful message that it isn't just issues we're talking about, it's real lived experience we're trying to work with.
I think that we need to communicate more. I think that communication is the key for everything. And like we need to also realize that even though you all live in Ireland, I live in Finland, but still everyone is taking precautions, and we just try to do our best. And if we like talk about it together, we will realize that maybe we're not that different. And even though we're all from different faiths, it's all right, because still there are so many things that unite us. And yeah.
Salma, Roni, Daniel, you know, you have made this discussion extraordinary. I have enjoyed it. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening, but thank you for learning with us, because that's what we're here for. We're here to learn, to look for a brighter future, hopefully together, and empower each other as people of faith and young people, to hopefully overcome the challenges, because that is what we are about, and hopefully to learn from the parables and the values of our own religious and scripture and our practices.